Welcome, good morning. Thought I would record this because I'm seeing a lot of recent posts around the Rakat structure here. Rakat structure. People are like, Atlantis, Atlantis, and to the point where it's like becoming a defended thing. Like, I'm starting to post my opinion and receiving just down votes because people are literally just convinced that this was Atlantis. And the reality is it didn't even exist at the time, so I wanted to go into that. That's what I thought I would record about, just point out, hey guys, uh, sorry to burst your bubble, pretty much burst your bubble, just like where Constructure happened. What actually happened there, pretty much, was a bond breaking. Long story short. Okay. What people aren't accounting for is that the Earth expanded. People don't know that because they don't know a lot of things. That's the reality of the situation is people don't know a lot of things because they aren't exposed to a lot of things. It takes just being exposed to a lot of things to be aware of the things, to then reference the things. So if people don't even know that plate tectonics has an opposing counter theory called the expanding earth model, and that actually is the factual case. It's not some flat earth shit where people try to like couple the two together. Flat earth, expanding earth, same thing. No, they're not. Your nuanced approach is not very nuanced, dude. Not the same whatsoever. Not nuanced. Earth expanded, and nuancedly it expanded rapidly in the same process as radioactive decay, because that's what it was. The Earth was physically changing to a new particle, and in so doing, an inflow of energy occurred that then changed the particle, basically caused a supernova of the Earth as a planet. And that process began, as I've talked about in depth, by the attack of Dwarka by a vortex weapon. Now, this is why people don't listen to me, because I'm telling them things they don't know that sound absurd. The less they know about it, the more absurd it sounds. So it's easy to just dismiss because I'm just jumping to the conclusion. Hey, by the way, Earth was attacked. I'm not jumping to the conclusion. I'm just getting there in what I'm saying to you. It's not like I jumped to the conclusion. I'm simply stating a conclusion that when you hear it, if you're not aware of it, it just is. What in the fuck did that dude just say? You're crazy. All these name callings and downvotes I get for just speaking things that people just don't know about. That's really the problem. They're like, that can't be true. I don't know about it. I'm too smart for that. I'm too smart. I would have known first and foremost. I would have known, and that's not the case. I've come to the conclusion that Atlantis was the Ricard structure, and I'm just gonna defend it mindlessly now. Down boat. This person saying otherwise. When it starts to become like a behavioral thing that I see, that I didn't see before, that makes me say, right now we're approaching this like Ricard structure argument of Atlantis, like exponential curve where people are just going to start saying, yes, it was, with like certainty in their minds when they don't know what they're talking about because they don't know that the earth expanded. They don't know so many details. They don't even know about Dwarka, let alone that it existed, that it was right here, that it was attacked by a vortex weapon that punctured the mantle. They don't know any of this shit. They don't know any of this shit. It's utterly not part of their awareness, accounted for whatsoever, because they don't know any of it. Until it's accounted for, it doesn't actually, like, stand as a good argument. Sure, it does without accounting for it. It's like, well, it's round. It's got layers. I mean, First of all, it's not in the ocean, so I mean, what are we doing? Plato says it's in the ocean. Why would we like base it's literally based on Plato. We can't like be like Plato says this and you know all these other people say enough other things that will go off of what the other people say even though they're like millennia later. Plato said it thousands of years ago. Now some people are saying like 50 years ago some other shit. I'm pretty sure that the whole idea of Atlantis is based off of Plato. We can't just like ignore what Plato said. Plato's time, I mean, sure, it was underwater. Now it's not. Here it is. See? No, no, dudes. That's not how it works. Okay. So, the reality is the Ricard structure is only 100 million years old, according to radiometric dating, which means it formed recently. It formed after Atlantis was being sunk to the bottom of the ocean. It's not some Atlantis when it formed after the fact. People don't know that because they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. That doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. Just because you don't know what I'm talking about doesn't mean I don't. So let's get that straight. Okay. Now, expansion began 550 million years radiometric dating, but it was only at the time of ancient Dwarka when it was attacked by a vortex weapon, which then caused currents to flow in all directions underneath the crust of the single landmass of the Earth with no oceanic crust formed. And the currents then flowed outward in all directions, but then over time started to shape boundaries by the currents, and so it largely had a westward and eastward, north and south propagating currents that got sort of divided by like the boundaries between the directions that were shaped by the currents. This was all shaped by these currents of flows coming out of the mantle puncture hole underneath the crust and just flowing and reshaping the boundary. And notably, they flowed this way here the whole length of Europe pretty much to the Mediterranean is this flow across that cuts over here before the Earth expanded over here. So that's why Azores Plateau, which is here, like, there's not a continental shelf. This is, and maybe some chunks of it are there, but I really, based on this, I don't see any continental shelf. Maybe it's there, pardon me. If Azores Plateau, more so I'm willing to consider Azores Plateau than Ricard structure because first of all, it's not even underwater. Second of all, I mean, sure, it's nearby enough. And there's reasons. It's not like there's not reasons to consider Ricard structure. And I agree that this general region was generally where Atlantis was generally. But that doesn't mean that the city of Atlantis as described by Plato and so on was the Ricard structure. No, it does not mean that. Because the Ricard structure just simply did not exist yet. I'm pretty sure a lot of the like arrowheads are not even arrowheads. People don't know what they're talking about. That's the problem. People don't know what they're talking about. Arrowhead right here caused by nova. They happen naturally. No one needs to shape an arrowhead. When we find all these arrowheads, we don't know what we're talking about. They are products of reactions. They're not humanly made inherently. Just because they have a shape of an arrowhead, hunter-gatherer, doesn't mean we know what we're talking about whatsoever. So those things found around the Ricard structure, it's like spherical things that look shaped. Things that just look shaped doesn't mean humans did it. There's lots of things that are shaped not by the hands of humans, but by currents in nature, just flows. That sure someone maybe was behind because someone attacked ancient Dwarka with a vortex weapon. But so Rakat's structure is only 100 million years old. This is late game. This is very late game showing up. This is after Atlantis has sunk. It's not even present on the Earth when Atlantis was there. It's literally cannot be Atlantis. Atlantis was sunk by this current flowing across this way. That's how little is known of Atlantis because it got shit on. They were fucking up, dude. They were so fucked up in what they were doing. Whatever was going on in Atlantis was like as the equivalent of like how the U.S. government's just like straight up tyranny and behaves like it's like a bastion of truth to the world. But it's just a fucking tyrannical system that steals and murders everyone that doesn't comply with democracy, and not just democracy but stolen democracy at this point. Lies, not even real organic democracy, some fake ass bullshit that's been taken over by fucking liars who are lying, and it doesn't matter. Besides the point, Atlantis was probably like that. So people who are all like, Atlantis, yeah, Atlantis, yeah. Like, there's probably a reason it's not in the history books because they didn't deserve to be, like, straight up. Whereas Dwarka over here is at least, like, there's scriptures. There's all sorts of information on Dwarka. Sure, it was attacked by a vortex weapon because they also were doing some shit, probably. But, and it was just time. The Earth was just collapsing from an advanced society that knew what the fuck they were talking about. Unlike our society, that's fucking lost. And we're trying to get back to that understanding, but unfortunately, in order to get there, we gotta get through people's like stepping stones of like conclusions. Oh, this is what I concluded. Well, you can't tell me otherwise because I've come to this conclusion. Even though you clearly have done the research, and I have not looked into any of those things, and therefore, like, your fucking argument falls apart when like physics comes into the play, geology comes into play, scripture comes into play, all these angles that are barely considered, like barely. And I'm talking real geology, real physics, real scripture, not false interpretations. I'm saying the theory of everything in physics discovered it first and foremost 2014. That's my first discovery before I even looked at the earth really like this. So to like think that someone can show up and look at the earth without even knowing how physics works and like conclude accurately how it worked without knowing how physics works. Come on. Come on, dudes. It's obviously a work in progress until we figure enough shit out to figure it out, like in truth. At which point, then we figure it out in truth, and it's not a work in progress, and the details become just a matter of filling them in, which is itself an infinite path. But Atlantis probably got so far down that path that they were just like fucking with humans, because it was pretty much a society of advanced humans that were so advanced that they gave birth to a like innocent race of humans that was Adam and Eve, and like led to this secondary civilization that they gave birth to, like a parent giving birth to a child. That's what happened, is they were our parent society and they were fucking us literally, and those amongst them who knew better said, we done with this, back to square one, attack Dwarka, literally erase Atlantis from the history books to the point where it's barely known. Just, yeah, this place existed. Did it exist? Like, one person says it existed. It's not even known, though, because it's got shit on so bad. Because it just didn't adhere to things that are reasonable. as soon as reason was dropped, like they were pretty much like fuck it. They were just like fuck it, literally again. Going down, taking wives. This is what happened there. As they say in the scripture, they took wives, had giants amongst man, where they had like demigods, like half god, half human offspring that were like really off balance, off kilter, because half of them was just this advancedness and the other half was this unadvanced. Like, I don't know how, whether that itself is just utterly like an abomination in some way. I don't know, maybe, and maybe it was very important to get rid of for some reasons that are not easily understandable, and to the point where what had to happen was the Earth needed to be expanded to a new radius by attacking it with a vortex weapon and then causing the water to flood out across the surface and the entire surface to be changed, pretty much killing anyone on the planet who wasn't prepared for it, which most of people were not because they were fucking around. According to the Bible, they just didn't fucking know that the flood was coming. They're like, flood, they pulled some of that shit like everyone does nowadays. Oh, you don't know that Mercury's about to fucking supernova in your face? No, you don't know. Fine. You don't know that fucking doom shape that the vortex weapon used on ancient Dwarka caused. That was a swirling vortex that then is now currently the South Atlantic anomaly. You don't know that it's moving to plug the hole that it is right here, pretty much. To create a counter pole to a negative pole to the positive pole here, to allow for currents of the magnetic field of the Earth to flow from new poles, which will then cause an imbalance because they're not actually opposing one another, which will then lead to who the fuck knows what's going to happen to the Earth as it transforms to become more like Mars. You don't know that? Oh. Yeah. There's some shit going on, dudes. So, if you want to be like the people in the days of Noah who were just partying, that's your choice. But so back to the Ricard structure. This is not it, because it must have existed before the Earth was expanded. Not before the Earth was attacked by a vortex weapon, which happened in the Cambrian. Basically, the Cambrian explosion was a Cambrian mass dying of things that were alive at the time, because they did that. Created life on Earth, or brought it here from a different location in the least, and were able to actually create life on Earth. Like Prometheus style. But then they were just fucking it. Initially it was just like some play toy, like, oh, created this life. But then they got like clever enough and interactive enough and, like fun enough. It's like, I kind of want to hit that. Game over. The other gods were like, that dude over there, he seems pretty serious, like he's gonna attack the Earth with a vortex weapon. If you fucking do that, I would recommend you not do that. They're like, he ain't gonna do that shit. How crazy would such a person be to attack the Earth with a vortex weapon when it's in such a state of abundance? Yeah, sure, we all know it's a possibility. He ain't gonna do it. He's bluffing. I'm fucking that human right there. You my wife now. Okay. It's just utterly abuse. Then that person, like that whoever the fuck, it's like, them motherfuckers I tried to tell them. Now what? What they make it like I'm a fucking bluffing now. They think I'm bluffing. They think because they think I'm bluffing, they're gonna take that action in front of my fucking face like that. Vortex weapon. Christian's like, stop! No, he's doing it. Doesn't fucking matter. It's done. He gets shot down. His plane, his UFO is still the dude that did it. UFO's still over here somewhere waiting to be found. Because it got shot the fuck down, but it was too late. The vortex had begun. And then it grew. It punctured enough where it was like growing, expanding to like reach to the mantle puncture hole. Here. It started here and basically punctured energy through to the mantle puncture hole by ether from space flowing into the earth through this vortex, through like the column of it, down to the mantle puncture hole where it punctured the mantle, and then mantle upwelled while space inwelled, and then basically caused this whole region to be transformed. But like by the time the storm was just starting, this dude was already shot. His UFO was shot down. As far as the Hindu scripture is concerned, this vortex, it attacked Dwarka. Dwarka was sunk under the sea, and that's about all that at least that I'm aware of that like referring to this process. And then it just goes on because then the process happens where that's what's happening. The process is occurring. And it doesn't really matter that this vortex storm, like it's referenced in other places. That's how it works. Reality is interconnected like that, where it's no single source has all the information. Even like Hindu scripture, like conveniently leaves out the details. Bible conveniently leaves out the details. There was a flood. There wasn't no flood. People like science. We know there wasn't no flood. We know there wasn't no flood. It literally was right like this large. Like we can see the remnants of where the water flowed here. It flowed over here as well. For certain, it was in these regions. And probably the whole globe, just more depositing in these regions. So, Rakat structure cannot be. Is basically a bond breaking. It's a little anomalous because the currents were flowing across it. That's the thing, is the currents of water depositing sandy materials over this land to create a desert over time. Because initially it had enough like water exposure to like stay wet, to not like dry out completely, but then like it dried out and now it's just a desert. And any civilization that like post flood built in this region just had to leave because they couldn't be there. But like anything going on here, there was no civilization around it because, at least not before the earth expanded, before Atlantis, because it just didn't exist. It's really not complicated in that way. It couldn't have been Atlantis. It just couldn't have been. It must be Precambrian crust. And if we hinge to Plato, because he's the one who really referenced it, and here's the Strait of Gibraltar to this region. Right across here is here, which is where Flemish Cap really is. I think it might have been up here. Generally more over here. But very much still an island that very much was, or a sunken island, that very much was in this region, generally speaking. It even looks like this shape, even though it looks like more like it was up here. Every time I look at it, I'm like, it looks like that shape. Like maybe it was there, but I don't want to force it there. Like generally speaking, it's more over by this boundary where this closed up. This was closed up here, and then like generally there. But still, it's in this region. Azores does have a maybe an up on that, although I'm literally pushing it to its farthest limit to put it over here. It may be more over here. Like at the most, it was over on the opposing side of Spain and Portugal. But what's important about Flemish Cap is several things. First of all, it's an island. Second of all, it's Precambrian crust. It's a sunken Precambrian crust island that's substantial size that no one's really considered, so it very well could be Atlantis in that regard. It's not really been studied except for a few drill samples. And if it was Atlantis, it may be so removed from the surface that we'd have to like dig down to even notice some like remnants of the civilization there. So it may be that without substantial like study of Flemish Cap, which just hasn't occurred substantially, it's more so looking for oil kind of studies that have occurred there than anything else. Not really like is Atlantis there? Kind of like interestedness. It's more just boring, like for the sake of profits and gains kind of thing. Not out of curiosity has anyone looked into Flemish Cap extensively. It seems to be a pretty boring geological subject matter. Very little written on it, although what I did find recently, Flemish Cap hornblende. Okay. Flemish Cap, a large isolated submarine knoll 600 kilometers east of Newfoundland, consists of a central core of Hadrian rocks. I assume that's. I've tried to find where they're referring to. I don't know. It's probably not this. Not that old. I don't know this term. I cannot find it. If I search for this. I guess it's there. 850 to basically leading into the Precambrian, but forming like as the Earth transitioned from a previous state to the Precambrian, because essentially, it's a long story. I'd basically say watch Mercury, the Messenger God video of mine to really see what I'm getting at with like this time period of what occurred. So in that time period, there was no one here yet. It was not yet any civilization, any humans, any life, maybe some like microscopic life, but no human life was on Earth yet at this time. When the Hadrian rocks were just, when this was when Flemish Cap was being formed, essentially it was like Venus and then Mercury supernova. This is what I mean by like the things I say that people don't know anything about. They just assume it doesn't, like it's not valid because they don't know anything about it. And it doesn't compute with what they do know, but I know too much. Like, I know that Mercury supernovaed and became Venus, and that Mercury will supernova again and cause Venus to become the new Earth, while Earth becomes the new Mars. Assuming we don't turn back time and correct things truly by realizing that's what we need to do. In some way, like actually healing the planet and stopping the process, and it's all just like bumpers to like correct us without having to actually have Mercury supernova and Venus become a new Earth. It just looks that way. But I mean, based on all evidence of society just not giving a shit about a word I have to say, and what really about the truth, that just being driven and controlled by dominant powers rather than truth seekers, fucking tyrants rather than truth seekers, people who are just using the system for their own personal gain rather than trying to help the world at their own expense, really. Like, I don't have any of my retirement. I'm fucking ostracized from society. That's my expense. Whereas tyrants steal money and waste it. That's how we do, and that's why it's highly probable that their stupidity that's just like snowballed across time from generations of tyrants being allowed to rule the world, because it's also our stupidity, collective stupidity, our collective like laziness, also any like negative trait, our collective, those negative traits have allowed like tyrants to just run amok, because we don't care. We'd rather just like live our lives. It's easier that way than to give a shit, but we really need to like set up the circumstances first to be able to do that, or else tyrants will just steal everything we have and kill everyone until equilibrium emerges, and then they'll be like, see, equilibrium, perfect, we did it. Maybe that's what ends up from what I have to say also, because I'm leading perhaps to the Mercury supernova event. But so, beyond this, the central core of the cap, sampled with an electric rock core drill, comprises pink, fine to medium grain granodiorite, which is reminiscent of Mount Girnar. Dacite. Let's see what that is. Dacite. Volcanic rock formed by rapid solidification of lava. Highly silica and low in alkali metal oxides. Really strongly suggestive of differentiation is what I'm getting at. Crystal differentiation of Mount Girnar. Maybe it would be good to pull up Mount Girnar at this point. Where did I put it? This. So we got olivine gabbro in a hexagon surrounded by basically mostly basalt is the green. This all of the green within is basalt, as well as outside here is basalt. And then olivine gabbro within the basalt, intruded by olivine gabbro, intruded by diorite monzonite, and then biotite at the contact zone with nepheline cyanite xenoliths in the intrusion of diorite monzonite with lamprophyre nepheline cyanite, like combinations where they came up together, sort of like a positive negative material. But so like similar materials here, biotite is present, which biotite formed at this boundary. So like that, there's a diorite at all. This other material that sounds highly related, alkali metal, low in, high in silica, low in alkali metal oxides. That's reminiscent of maybe how the Girnar again, of how the granophyre ring here is. Let me see if that makes sense. Yeah, I think the granophyre is like is more of a Like there's basically alkaline and acidic rocks here that are sort of interacting with one another. I think it's a granophyre that's more on the like acidic side. Not alkaline. Granite. So fractional crystallization is basically a separation occurs. This is assuming like no mixing, but really almost inevitably there's mixing. Like here there was a distinct spiral going on with another vortex here, but a large vortex here that physically caused separation of the materials outward and inward, and especially inward, to create like a compacted peak and then an outer ring type structure. So there's this like mountain in the midst of these plains for a reason, because there was an eddy occurring there. And so Flemish Cap, relating that to Flemish Cap, just I can't find the totality of this paper, but relating that to this abstract, because I have to pay for it, of course. Gotta pay, and it's a little old, in 1985, to find like other places posting it, like ResearchGate. Tends to be newer papers because people publish them when they write them on there. Like, these people may not even be alive still. Pardon me if you guys are. I'm alive. Granodiorite samples collected in 6 out of 8 cores are remarkably similar lithologically, despite a separation of up to 65 kilometers. Probably represent a single pluton. Aphanitic, dacite, and laminated cherty volcanic siltstone have been metamorphosed to subgreen schist facies, but show no evidence of contact metamorphism. Analysis of coarse and fine zircon fractions from a granodiorite core yielded upper intercepts of 750 to 833 million years, respectively. Although not precise, these ages probably represent the age of the intrusion sometime in this range, and are older than those reported for similar Hadrianian granitic rocks of eastern Newfoundland. So this is maybe indicative of something in terms of something I'm not understanding that I don't understand, because it just brings to mind Gurnar again. Like, here's Gurnar, but let's go back. Oops. Here's Gurnar. I think I need to find Gujarat somewhere. Gurnar, but then there's all these intrusions. There's all this nuance here that really makes it like maybe one of them formed after. I know that this formed before. I'm not sure if any structure formed after. Gurnar seemed to be more like the end of the process. So it's a little anomalous, honestly. If anything, in my understanding, it's a little counter to. Not that it's, I don't know enough to really be like kind of concerned or anything. It's just a counter to what I would just initially think, because I'm just attempting, and based on what I'm thinking is based on that there are similar rocks here. There's biotite, granodiorite. that formed again before the Earth expanded really is strongly suggestive that there was differentiation going on just because of the similar materials. Like that, probably that to me means that's what was going on, which means there was some sort of eddy. That's what I'm getting at. Is there was some sort of eddy like Gurnar, like how this current flows in an eddy, in an eddy, in an eddy. Eddies, not just a straight propagation of current, but an actual eddy present in the formation of Flemish Cap. Which would suggest, the reason that's important is, well, was it an island before? What if it wasn't an island before and it was just continental shelf, like it was just kind of hanging out here and it was part of everything else and it was all just one unit really, so like it's hard to say if it was an island kind of thing, so we kind of gotta look and guess and see based on information. But crystal fractionation, fractional crystallization. We'll say it that way. Fractional crystallization perhaps occurred here, which would perhaps mean there was some sort of more like a mound, like a upper point with lower regions surrounding it because of the eddy that was present. And then, this is what really I think is interesting also, that I found recently and didn't find beforehand. Hornblende from the same core on, and a biotite from a granodiorite core elsewhere in the body probably represent incomplete degassing during the superimposed sub-green schist metamorphism of uncertain age. Thus, the Flemish Cap, granodiorite, and associated rocks are part of the Avalon zone and may represent a much older part of the Avalon terrain than parts towards the west on Avalon Peninsula and Burin Peninsula. So, first of all, if there's a larger continent that Atlantis was on and Flemish Cap was part of it, then it would be the Avalon zone is highly, like, related to where the Avalonia microcontinents in the Paleozoic, which I believe is before. I guess it was just breaking up. So it was the Avalonia formed in the initial breaking up of this region, because essentially a current's coming across here. Across this way. Which then really flows underneath above Spain here. To like this boundary basically. And up to there probably. Let's see. Here. It goes all the way up to this boundary is pretty much around there. I mean, it looks like here's England at all. There's those islands, up past those islands, and then just straight across here. This way. Let's do this. really up through here and across generally here, like here. It's basically bounded by the mountains. Here's this. To get an idea of where this boundary is we can go by the here. So it's definitely pretty much there. It's pretty much there. So Avalon for sure. This Avalon zone, I don't know. Oh yeah, that's right. This is for sure based on that current, where that current was flowing. So Avalon, this region here, where Flemish Cap was kind of central to. Here, pretty much central to it. That's probably, if anything, that's probably where Atlantis is. Although it was still, like, this was still part of Atlantis too. This boundary is just more so formed by the currents. So it's still, like, it's still all of it to a degree. Although this might have been more so part of, it might, like, indicate some segment that was a little more, like, part of Flemish Cap at the time. But so, Hornblende, though. Hornblende. Water. Occurrence. Hornblende is a common constituent of many igneous and metamorphic rocks, such as these. It crystallizes in preference to pyroxene minerals from cooler magma that is richer in silica and water. So mind you, Hornblende from the same core, 800 or 615 plus or minus 20. So basically, there is a mineral in Flemish Cap before the Earth expanded, which was 550 million years radiometric dating, that indicates the presence of water in the region. That's my take on it. Therefore, like, it probably was surrounded by water, so it was probably a peak that had, like, eddies coming up to a point. It probably was surrounded by water because it has hornblende. Edenite from its locality, Edenville, New York. Let's see where that is. Wait. Is it Edenville? Eden! That's pretty much at the boundary of Avalonia, maybe. Is it? Nah, maybe a little past it. Or maybe it's at it, I don't know. It's pretty close to the boundary of Avalonia. Right here. Thereabouts. Boundaries like here, according to this. Wait, am I right? No. This has got to be this, right? Oh yeah, yeah. Boundary is here, up this way. Pretty close. Maybe indicative of, like, a current that really was flowing this way generally and hit hit the Appalachians resistance here. Just hit resistance here. That maybe contains less than 5% iron oxide. Does this have a lot of iron oxide in it? Or where is first described? Occurrence. Occurs in pods of other magnetite-rich minerals within a marble formation or with garnet-rich larzolites. Ultramorphic igneous rock. Coarse-grained. 40 to 90% olivine. High temperature regional metamorphism of the surrounding rocks. Monoclinic crystal system and is the crystal class 2M. Okay. So to me, like, that's where Atlantis was. If Atlantis existed, it was Flemish Cap. It's really that simple. There may be remnants at the Azores Plateau. And maybe it did sink. Like, it does kind of, from this angle, from this map, it look like there could be some buried continent under the oceanic crust, physically buried under basaltic flows. But then, like, the chunk of continental crust physically sank. Like, physically sank into the ocean currents of basalt emitting and just sunk below it and then into it, and this really, like, down low enough where its boundaries are still somewhat visible but hidden. Like, high enough where its boundaries are visible, but low enough where it looks almost like the surrounding. Like, we kind of can see something going on here. Although this is probably more so related to just, like, the positioning and the currents leading to this. But, I mean, maybe that's, like, there's a reason the currents maybe went right here. So it's possible that this was actually here, which was actually generally adjacent to Flemish Cap, but it's, even so, I would say, like, this was, like, adjacent territory, and this was, like, the Atlantis, the city of, and, like, not just the, like, whatever the term is, the, like, suburbs. So that was my thoughts. I just really felt I needed to talk about Atlantis, because if you go through my videos, I don't talk about Atlantis really at all. And yet it's explained by my research. That's the thing, is my research explains Atlantis, but it's not even directly explaining it. That's how I feel it. It's just so got shit on by this vortex weapon that it was deserved. It had to have been deserved. Like, the people were just fucking mindlessly, literally. That was something of that nature. The mindless sex that was just driven by, like, purely base carnal desires. it's just, I don't know. That's how our society kind of makes things. It drives things to be in some ways. That's like a base characteristic of humanity. It's not a place we want to be. It's a place we can fall to if we're not paying attention. But we really need to be for like longevity and health and happiness and those kinds of things. Like it cannot be that way. And the society that existed in the time of Atlantis just overcame sexual desires. It just wasn't that important. It just wasn't that critical. It's like less important than like the awesomeness of reality, where like people had partners and were fine and happy and didn't need to like have the everything. Like that's part of it. We're like, we want it all. Then we start sleeping around with everyone because one's not enough. And that shit was going on in Atlantis, but it was going on between basically people who knew better and people who were at their beck and call and trusted them, relied on them, believed everything they said, had no reason to question them. So when they decided, well, let's give you a reason by just lying and manipulating to all of you, then they ended up getting too much like chaos emerging from the interactions that led to just vortex weapon, and then reset button was pressed, pretty much like a Nintendo needs reset. Press the reset button, and the earth was flooded because it happens time and again. And then started anew without all those fuck ups, where the society was like, we were kind of losing sight of what's important, and they document it in ways that we can barely comprehend because it's like state of mind is so base. It's so focused on like sexual urges practically. As a focus, like that's really what drives people's day to day on a way too large of a scale. And is promoted, like the government promotes it. The government just feeds that shit. All the governments in the world, they benefit from our like basal, because then it gives them excuses. Oh, look at you guys behaving all poorly. Look how poorly you're all behaving. We need reason to control you. So, like, it's perfect. Because you're all fucking each other and, like, against each other's will in some places. And that's not good. So we need to exist. So perfect. And they come to exist and feed the world into this, like, all the while, this way of life where all the while they're like feeding sex into the world. Like, here, look at all these naked women. Look at them all. Did you see how half naked this one is? I bet you wonder what it's like under there. Did you see that? Did you see that? That. What are you doing? You gotta control yourself, okay? Control yourself. Behave. What are you doing? Being all sexually aroused. Like, as if it's not the government's fucking fault. The way of life. The way of life that the controlling dominant forces impose on us, like, their actual fault. Okay, so, with that in mind, Atlantis, Flemish cap, not Ricotte structure, because it just simply didn't exist. It formed in the process. It's that simple. Formed in the process. Could not be Atlantis. It's pretty much a impact crater that has been eroded by currents over top it, that formed at the right time and place to see its internal structure, but it's not. It never was Atlantis. It never was a place where people lived, maybe to a small degree, but not some like the most advanced city of Earth had a seabed here, blah blah blah, whatever, seaports, and no, not the case, because Atlantis was over here. Alright, peace out.